He said it in one sentence. If I wanted to paint a birch tree, I would paint a birch tree. But I want to paint God, and God cannot be shown, only hinted at. So a brilliant young scholar walked away from science. He spent the rest of his life trying to paint the one thing no eye can see. He said he was writing an icon. Here is what almost nobody tells you about the man who painted the first abstract picture in history. He did not start as a painter. He started as a scientist, with a professor's chair waiting for him. Then, one by one, a handful of shocks pulled the solid ground out from under the world. An expedition into the far north, Monet's haystacks, a raid that passed straight through a living hand. Over the next hour, I will walk you through every one of them. By the end, when you stand in front of one of his storms of color, you will know exactly what to do with it. Start with what a painting was. For 500 years it meant one thing. The picture is young, it shows up in the 1400s, and before that there is only art on the walls. A stretched canvas and on it a story, a hero, a person, or an animal acting inside a set of circumstances. Now Kandinsky pulls two words apart that we always glue together: story and idea. A picture needs an idea, he says. It does not need a story. So the hero does not have to be a man or a thing. It can be a point, a line on a plane, a color, a shape. Not a thing from the natural world, a thing from the world of painting. That is where abstraction is born. But this is bigger than one more style. Matisse opened a direction. Picasso opened a direction. Kandinsky opened a language. Abstraction stopped being a movement and became the tongue every other movement of the 20th and 21st century would speak. He was not a revolutionary for the art of a century. He was a revolutionary for art itself. Once the door is open, you cannot close it again. To paint a plain figure now as if the discovery never happened is impossible. As impossible as living after the Second World War and pretending it never came. So what are these thorns of color for? Kandinsky did not build them to be read, he built them to be felt. A finished abstraction, he thought, works like a meditation. An icon for the 20th century, his paintings do not survive cold, rational study. They were made for a different kind of knowing, emotional, atmospheric, felt in the body. He rewired what a picture is, but he did not touch a brush until he was 30, and the reason is stranger than the pictures. His great-great-grandfather robbed travelers on the Siberian roads. A good robber by all accounts. Then he stopped. He settled down and married a Tungus princess named Gantemurova, a woman Kandinsky liked to call his Mongolian princess. And the highwayman died, a first guild merchant and a counselor of commerce. He held the whole Nershchinsk province under his hand, a man other men were afraid of. The blood never thinned. Kandinsky said it plainly, it was all mixed in him. Scythian, German, and Buryat, in a single man, and he was born into the kind of family that earns the word aristocrat, an intellectual household, cultured and interesting. All of it there long before the child in it had done a thing worth noticing. His father, Wassily, came to Moscow and married a Baltic German, Lydia Tikeva, so the house he grew up in spoke two languages, and neither one was second. Russian and German were both his from the start, two mother tongues, two entire cultures he never once had to choose between. Hold that man in your head, because he never did one thing at a time. He was a theorist and a painter at once, and the theory drove the hand. He was a scientist and an artist, and the science leaks into the pictures. He was a musician, and you can hear it in them. He believed in God but joined no church. He was a theosophist, and his whole idea of the universe ends up on the canvas. But before any of that, he was a scientist and a serious one. He enrolled to study law at the university in Moscow in 1885 and came out a brilliant graduate. He went on scientific expeditions. He wrote a dissertation. Then a university in Tartu offered him a professor's chair, the kind of prize a young scholar builds his whole life toward. but something odd was happening out in the field. The expeditions were meant to make a scientist of him. Instead, they kept pulling him the other way, toward the life of an artist. From 1893, the great upheavals started, the ones that would end with him leaving science behind for good. He was 30. That number matters. In the 1800s, a man of 30 is grown and settled, with a wife, a career underway, a name that means something. Kandinsky had all of it within reach, the whole respectable life laid out in front of him. Everything a man was supposed to want by that age he already had, or could have for the asking. And he turned it down. In 1896, he renounced science the way a man renounces a faith, and gave himself to art instead. He would start again from nothing. He would go to Europe to learn how to paint, because Europe was where everything new was being made. So, a brilliant lawyer with a chair waiting for him, and at 30 he said no to all of it, hunting for something science could not give him. The first answer was waiting at the edge of the map. Picture a young scientist heading north. For a very long time he travels, by dogs, by reindeer, on and on. At last he reaches a place at the very edge of the map. He is there to collect the criminal law of a pagan tribe and the last scraps of their old pagan religion. And this tribe has no judge, it has a shaman. The shaman decides whether you're guilty and what your punishment will be. But what stopped him was not the law, it was the color. In Europe, at the end of the 1800s, people dress in brown, in grey, in black. A pale blouse at most. Then he reaches this place at the edge of the map, and the people are painted from head to foot, bright and patterned all over. He wrote down what he saw. His people, he said, looked to me like walking two-legged paintings. It was the sheer color of them. The pattern everywhere. Dresses covered end to end. Animals, flowers, plain geometry. Not one bare patch of cloth anywhere on them. Then he stepped inside their huts, and it went further still. The walls were painted, not white, but color, sometimes one wall one shade and the next another, and standing there in that riot of walls, the objects, the spinning distaff, the cupboard, the great stove, every one of them buried under ornament and paint. And here is what he slowly understood. None of it was decoration. Every single mark was a sign, a charm, a totem, a cipher. Each small detail was carrying a meaning, and you were meant to read it. An amulet, not an accident. The circle was the sun. The square was the plowed field. The horse was the sign of the sun god. Old signs, he said. The kind you find scratched on the walls of caves, wandering from one people to the next for many thousands of years. What amazed him was how simple it was. You did not need to be a professor to read it. And still it spoke about the largest things. How the world is made. What a life is for. These people had encrypted their whole world into a handful of simple signs. He kept reaching for one comparison, and it was a bold one to make. Icons. The tribe hung their own icons right there on the wall of the hut, and to him they were no shallower and no less loaded with meaning than the great Christian icons of Russia. But the one sentence that matters most came later, when I walked into that colorful hut, he wrote, and sank down into the ornament. The painting rose up around me, and I walked inside it. Hold on to that line, because it comes back. Years later, he would ask the very same thing of anyone standing in front of his abstractions. Do not just look at the picture. Walk into it, the way you walk into a room. Truly step inside, and let yourself sink into it. After the North, he saw his own faith with new eyes. The Christian icon. The old church. A church, he realized, is not just a set of walls. It is a space where a believer and an image speak to each other. A sacred space you step inside. And yet, none of this made him a painter. Not yet. He went back to Moscow, back to his ordinary life. The exhibitions, the concerts, something had stirred in him. But he was still a scientist. Then a painting arrived from Europe. and it was about to make him angry. Moscow, 1896. A traveling show of new European painting reaches the city, and it carries the Impressionists with it. Kandinsky walks in. He stops in front of two canvases by Claude Monet. Both are called haystacks. He looks hard, and he cannot tell what he is looking at. What pulls him in is the color. Monet is not painting a haystack, he is painting light. The color itself carries the light, the air in motion, the color shifting from hour to hour as the sun crosses the field. Look at the second canvas. The same haystacks, but the light has changed and the color changes with it. Same subject. A completely different picture, a difficult, dazzling technique. So why does it leave him uneasy? Here is what he wrote in his own words. The vagueness was unpleasant to me, and I dimly felt that this picture had no subject. No subject. And he added, no meaning either. Hold on to that. A painting with nothing at all to point at. Now, why should that trouble anyone? Stand where Kandinsky stood. He was raised to treat a painting as a sign. The picture pointed beyond itself, to an idea, to a meaning you could name in words. Strip the subject out, and what is left? To him, a brilliant technique built around an empty center, and nothing more. So was he right? As I see it, yes. Ask why Monet paints haystacks at all. He does not paint one and move on. He paints a whole series of the same haystacks, then a whole series of one cathedral again and again. Not because the haystack carries a meaning, not because the cathedral stands for the divine. He wants a screen, a plain, ordinary surface where the real performance can play out. So what is that performance? The light. On that plain surface, a whole polyphony plays out at once. Highlights, reflected light, one shade sliding into the next. What matters is not the color by itself, but what light does to it. How it breaks the color apart. How spectral light sets the character of every tone. How it shapes the way you see the world in front of you. The meaning is not in the subject, it is in the paint. And here's the thing Kandinsky could not forgive. Monet was pointing at nothing but paint. The whole meaning lived inside the color, and nowhere else. For a man trained to look for a sign, that was an offense. One painter had thrown the subject away, and Kandinsky hated it. The next painter did the opposite, and he fell for him completely. He stood in the Hermitage, in front of a Rembrandt, and he did not move. He had simply gone to an exhibition and discovered him there. The longer he stood, the more the dark gave something up. The other painter he had come to with a bias, holding a little back. This one he loved at once. Loved him, in his own word, madly. What could Rembrandt teach a man heading toward pure abstraction? Start with one thing, the split of dark and light. Rembrandt opened it for him, and it is not decoration. That divide builds the drama of the picture. The light lifts out what matters, a face, a gesture, a meaning, and lets the rest fall into shadow. It decides where your eye lands and what the scene wants you to feel. You cannot picture Rembrandt without it. But the split does something stranger. It hides things. Look at the Father and the Son, held in the light. Keep looking. Behind them, out of the shadow, other figures step forward. A staircase you did not see climbs into the dark. The light gave you two men. The dark kept the rest. Give it more time and the cloth gives two. Rembrandt paints the details of the closing, and you just want to stand and enjoy it. None of it arrives fast. All of it asks you to wait. And here Kandinsky puts it into words. Rembrandt, he says, brings time into painting. You stand, you look, and the picture keeps opening and opening in front of you. It asks for patience and it pays you back for it. That is a strange gift, a painter who makes the clock part of the paint. It is not done when your glance is done. It is done when you are. So he set himself the same task. Could one of his own pictures hold you the way a Rembrandt holds you? He took a landscape he had painted and went looking for time inside it. The idea was simple. The doing was not. Look at Lange. There's a dark band that looks at a glance like plain black. Keep your eyes on it. The black is not black. Out of it come blue and green and yellow, warm and cold, and red in more than one shade. The foreground plays the same trick. A quick look calls it lilac and moves on. But stay with it, and the lilac breaks apart. Blue, green, brown, another blue, beige, white. One color climbing out of the one before it, none of them there until you gave the picture your time. Then he finished the series, stepped back and got a shock. To his own astonishment, he wrote, he was painting Rembrandt. The same move, the same secret. He had folded time into the canvas, the one thing without which you never truly feel a picture at all. Color from one painter, time from another. The tools were piling up. But the blow that broke his whole world did not come from any gallery. It came from physics. In 1895, a ray of light passed through a living hand and showed the bones underneath. Under the skin, everyone is the same. We wear different faces, different bodies. But the frame beneath is one frame. This is not a picture of a hand. It is the first proof that what you see is only the surface. Hold that thought. Rembrandt had shaken Kandinsky, but Rembrandt was not the thing that finally made him a painter. Something else was the last drop. It was science. It was the discoveries pouring out of these years and his own long thinking about where science ends and religion begins. Picture the end of the 1800s and the first years of the next century. We are used to discovery now. Something new opens every single day, and we barely look up. Back then, it was not like that. Every discovery was so large that we still cannot fully take it in, and not one person was left untouched. Everyone walked home and turned it over in their head, Kandinsky most of all. So what did they actually find at the turn of the century? The engine that burns its fuel inside itself. Trains, electricity in the wires, then the atom and the theory of relativity. And in 1895, X-rays, unknown rays that would later carry the name of the man who found them. Any one of these could break how you saw the world. Go back to that hand. Sit in front of me and I see one thing while the truth is another. I see only your outer shell. In the X-ray, your hand is a different hand, built in a way I will never see with my eyes. And if the hand is not what I see, then nothing I see is quite what is actually there. That lands on one hard question. If my own eyes deceive me, or at the very least keep something from me, can I trust my sight at all? Because if the eyes lie, the world is not the world I look at, and this pulls the whole art world toward the same doubt. The world is other than it seems. Then the atom made it worse. The atom was meant to be the final point, the smallest thing there is. It was not. It comes apart on its own, and smaller pieces hide beneath it, pieces they would only uncover later in the century. The world had grown too large to picture. It had run past the edge of ordinary human thought. It stirred every thinking mind of the age, and it stirred Kandinsky hardest of all. Kandinsky put it in a single line. He set the splitting of the atom beside a miracle. In his own words, after the atom came apart, I would not have been surprised. Not even if a stone had risen into the air and dissolved in it. Look at that, a painter, setting a miracle level with a scientific discovery. Because a miracle is now as easy to believe as the discovery is impossible to believe or to grasp at all. So look where this leaves a painter. If the eye lies, a painting of what the eye sees is a painting of a lie. Sit with that. It changes everything you have watched so far. The world it had opened could no longer be pictured at all. It had run past the edge of human thought itself. So where does a painter turn now? Here's the strange thing about science. It raises more questions than it solves, and opens more problems than it ever closes. Ask it what good is, or evil. Ask it what justice means, or what life and death are. And it goes quiet. Biology can tell you exactly what happens when a body dies. It has never once comforted anyone. Kandinsky knew that silence from the inside, and so do I. I have sat with death in my own family, knowing every step of what was coming. It was not the first time, and the knowing did not calm me, not by a particle. In front of a real loss, all of that knowledge is worth nothing. So he starts asking the questions science cannot touch. Do I even have a soul? And when I die, where does it fall? Into some black hole of nowhere, some oblivion with no name? Is a soul falling at all? And what then happens to me? The science he had loved has no answer to a single one. Once those questions had an answer, and it was always the same one. Every religion, every system of thought, Buddhism or even some esoteric system made the same promise. Do not be afraid. This world is not forever. What comes after is better. The kingdom of God is waiting for you. But that promise will not work on him now, and he knows exactly why. He was raised on rational philosophy. And then there is Darwin, pulling in the same direction, yet he wants to believe badly, because science leaves the worst questions wide open. One writer caught the whole age in a single line. Never had people so needed in their hearts to believe, and never had their minds so completely refused to. That was Merezhkovsky, and that was the real state of a man at the end of the 19th century. So Kandinsky makes his choice, and she says it plainly. I do not want to live with this science anymore. There is no strong love for it left in me, and worse, there is no faith in it. So he gives it up. In hard times, something else always wakes up, the esoteric. At the end of the 1800s, it stirred again. First came Theosophy. Then, in the early 1900s, Anthroposophy broke off from it, and Kandinsky became one of its followers. So what is Theosophy? A system halfway between religion and philosophy, welding scientific discovery onto religious belief. Not one religion, but many. A little Buddhism, a little Hinduism, a little Christianity, and underneath all of it, one absolute God. And its whole point is this. Where science goes silent, God begins to speak. It offers a theory of everything, the very thing physicists are still unable to write down. One idea inside it caught Kandinsky and would not let go. Man has torn himself away from God and forgotten the road back, but beauty can lead him home again. And the highest form of beauty in a living, breathing life, what is it? It is art. It was always art. So the answer was not science. It was art, and he remembered a painted hut in the far north. That plain Russian folk art, the lubok, the woodblock print, simple but deep, symbolic, made with soul and clear to everyone at a glance. So he picked up a brush. His first real pictures are fairy tales. Knights, a lady, a castle, a dark forest. He walks away from science, moves to Munich, enrolls in the Ashby School, and picks up a brush. And what begins there is symbolism. Symbolism is the air in Europe then, and Kandinsky breathes it in. The rule is simple. You may paint the ordinary everyday world, but that world has to hide something underneath. Every figure stands there, not for itself, but for a meaning below it. So you do not read the picture, you decode it. So he turns to folklore, German first, because he is living in Germany, then Russian. Once he goes back to Russia, it hardly matters to him which folk elements he takes. He works with archetypes, images that belong to German culture, and images that belong to Russian culture alike. Look at the meeting from 1901, a knight in a feathered hat, his lady, a castle behind them. They stand in a black forest, and that forest is every hostile, frightening thing at once. But you know their future is bright, because the castle behind them is glowing, all of it, in gold. A knight in the age of symbolism has a harder task than rescue. He has to lead himself and his lady to a spiritually right life, and where the knight breaks out of the dark forest into a clearing, the blue flower is waiting. It comes from Novalis, the German Romantics, and it is the symbol of the soul waking up. Spiritual insights, painted as a flower. Above him hangs a guiding star, a Bethlehem star steering his whole life and fate, while his lady waits by the castle. And on this picture, a line is written straight across it, a lady representing my love for you. 1903, Kandinsky painted it as a gift for his secret engagement to Gabrielle Munter. Now here is the quiet trick of these pictures. They are built from archetypes. A lady, a knight heralds a castle, a dark forest, some danger to escape, a happy ending. Fixed points you can shuffle into any order and build your own story from. And what works for the German tales works. Exactly the same for the Russian ones. So he never illustrates one tale. He takes the images that live inside all of them at once, show these to a room, and each person sees a different story. And everyone is right, and no one is. Here is Ivan Tsarevich with his love riding not the grey wolf you expect, but a horse. A wooden terem behind. A river with a sailboat, golden church domes, something close to the Kremlin. And the paint itself. He works in gouache, in little dabs left standing on the paper. Art historians call them Kandinsky's dabs or white snow. Up close they read like a mosaic, like Russian mosaic, and like the pointillists, Georges Seurat, whom he had just seen in Europe. Both at once. The works are small, meant to be held close and studied alone. But all of this is still storytelling. Knights, castles, tales you can shuffle into whatever order you like. The real puzzle is how a man who painted this ever reached abstraction, and the road there did not run straight. Instead, he walked toward abstraction the hard way, through landscapes, the one thing a viewer can check against the window. His symbolic pictures came from old folk tales, festivals. Nobody alive has seen, you can only imagine those. But a hillside, a village, a sky, you have seen those. That is exactly why he chose them. Look at his symbolic paintings for a moment. Turning one of these into abstraction is almost nothing. Shift the beard, drop the head a little, move the arm, and let the pieces scatter across the canvas as colored spots. Kandinsky said it himself. The task that enchanted him most was the mixing of masses, spots, and lines. These pictures are pure convention, anyway, not the real world, just signs. So letting them come apart costs him nothing. It is the obvious way in, and he refuses it. Here is the strange part. He leaves the symbolic paintings to one side and turns to landscape instead. His own circle did not take the landscape seriously. Painters he respected, Igor Grabor among them, smiled at what they called his exercises in the purity of color. They nicknamed him the composer. He would walk out to paint in the open air, look hard at one thing and set something else down on the canvas. But he was proud of exactly that. He grew up on the Wanderers and their dark canvases, and he clawed his way out of what he called the muddy gray glasses of Serov, Korovin and Levitin. In Europe he filled himself with bright color and carried it home. Not the harmony of grays, the harmony of pure, strong color. Here is Murnau with a rainbow, 1909. A real town, a real sky. So why does none of it look real? Because he wants it that way. He pushes the color past the truth on purpose, to reach the feeling underneath. The houses where colors no houses were. He is not copying a village. He is building a new language out of color. And there was one sunset he wanted to paint and could never catch. Not just any sunset. The one he watched from Chistoprodny Boulevard, burning down over the Kremlin. The colors shifting moment by moment, and he could not look away. So, ask yourself one thing. A sunset, is it a single point in time, or a length of it? Because a painting can only hold the point, it freezes one instant, and the color stops moving. But a sunset is nothing except color moving. How do you chop that in a still frame? Kandinsky could not. I surrender, he said. Nothing works with this sunset. So he went to the Pinakothek to see how the great masters had beaten it, and what he found there stopped him cold. Not one of them had. Nature had stayed undefeated. And that was not his weakness. It was a wall built into painting itself. Paint can never be as real as the real. That is the lesson he drew, standing in front of those masterpieces. So he turned the whole problem inside out. If you cannot copy the sunset, stop trying. Hand the viewer what it felt like instead, the atmosphere, the emotion, the state it left you in. And to do that, you are allowed to break things. Drop the details, bend the proportions, push the color past what the eye really saw. Wet asphalt after rain with the sun full on it does not read as gray. It glows like poured lava, and it half blinds you. Paint it gray and correct, and you keep the fact. You lose the fire. He wanted just once to paint a real sunset. He failed, and in that failure he found a rule that made everything else possible. 1910. A watercolor with no subject and no name but one. Kandinsky called it the first abstract picture in the history of art, and it was. Look at it. There is nothing to recognize. Just marks, colors, lines running loose across the paper. It is abstract twice over. Abstract in the painting, which shows only spots, and abstract in the title itself. Kandinsky left a warning with it. If you look and think you see a little cat in there, do not. It is just abstract painting. Nothing is hiding. Nothing is disguised. The picture is not a puzzle with a lost answer. The answer was never there. So did Kandinsky tear a hole in the history of art? He did not think so. He thought abstraction was coming anyway. That the whole history of painting had been pushing toward it. And when you look at what came right before him, it is hard to argue. Look at a Monet from 1908, the Japanese footbridge over his pond. Where is the bridge? The subject dissolves into the color around it. You can walk right past it and see only beautiful brushwork. Kandinsky used that word himself. The thing shown has slipped to second place. The color has taken the front. Now, Cézanne, a mountain above fields, late in the 1800s. Take the horizon line and soften it. Just blur that one line. Watch what happens. The colored strokes swallow the mountain. The mountain dissolves and you are left with an abstract picture. One line was holding the whole subject in place. And Picasso, what the Cubists were doing was almost abstract painting already. They knew it. They fought it. They pinned titles and little labels to the canvas to keep a grip on the subject. But look hard at some of these. You can barely tell what is there. A few small details and a label. Monet, Cézanne, Picasso. Each of them walked to the very edge of it. Kandinsky simply took the step that was coming anyway. He made the logical move and crossed into what was inevitable. And Kandinsky had come a long way to reach that edge. By 30, he had already crossed from one life into another. It started with science, with real discoveries, and it ended in paint. Monet, the neo-impressionists, and Rembrandt showed him what light could do and let him feel time living inside a picture. And his whole road ran in a circle. He left the pagans he had studied as a young man. He went out through all of modern art, reached Theosophy, and it carried him home to his own roots. Take one of his pictures, called Blue Mountain. Do not ask what it shows, ask what it does to you. People standing in front of it feel passion, unease, a hurry, a surge of energy. That is the point. With Kandinsky, you do not read the subject, you read the sensation. And the sensation has rules. Red, orange, yellow excite you. Stir you up the colors of passion and heat. Blue, green, lilac calm you down. A rising shape lifts you. A falling one tires you, settles you, weighs you down. So the blue and the climbing forms are already doing the work the subject used to do. The name Blue Mountain tells you almost nothing. He could have called it Red Tree and lost nothing at all. The subject is not the point. The state it puts you in is the point. So from 1910 on, he dropped real titles altogether and let the names go abstract too. And he did not invent any of this. At the end of the 1800s, a new science was opening up. The psychology of perception. How color and shape act on the mind. Kandinsky took that knowledge and laid it over his art. The same knowledge sits under art therapy today. He was writing about the feelings that join all of us, standing in front of different pictures. So the pictures had lost their subjects. Now watch what happens when you read one, not by what it shows, but by what it does to you. Look at Improvisation 11, and before you can name a single shape, you feel it. Alarm, cruelty, something violent. Ask why and you cannot point to a wound or a soldier. It is the angles, sharp pointed forms, colors that clash. A triangle driving into a softer shape, and straight lines rushing to run the triangle through, nothing to hold on to, everything spins, everything strains somewhere else. That is where the fear comes from. Now look again and the shapes resolve. That triangle is a boat. A little man inside it, bent over an oar, rowing. A wave, a shore. On the shore a horse thrown down, and beside the horse only now do you find them, hidden in the paint. A wheel and a barrel, a cannon. Soldiers with firearms. A stick with 6 men hanging from it, a gallows. So watch the order. You felt the cruelty first on the senses before you found one soldier. Then the figures only confirmed what the forms had already told you. Improvisation 11, 1910, already named in the abstract, and Kandinsky understood something simple and huge. You do not have to tell people what a picture shows, the form alone can say it. Many people said he had killed figurative arts, that by letting abstraction in he had murdered painting. His answer was calm. Abstraction erases nothing. It splits the old trunk into 2 main branches, and without both of them there is no green tree at all. Because the 2 branches do different work. If you want to paint a birch, you paint the birch plainly. But war is not only the concrete acts. War is also an abstract thing, a feeling, and that you carry better without the subject. It depends on your task. One does not block the other. One helps the other. So Kandinsky went further than any painter around him. He built a whole new system of genres. The first is the impression. It sits closest to the source, the direct first mark of the thing that moved him. A book, a piece of music, the open air. Whatever hits you first, you set it down while it is still warm. Impression 1, the concert, 1911, came straight out of a Schoenberg concert he sat through in the hall. You can still find real things in it. White columns, the seats, the black lid of a grand piano, a musician. And that spiel of yellow is the music itself, the sound flooding the room, the color of life and joy. It is what Schoenberg poured into him that night. The second genre is the improvisation. Here, he takes the idea from the source and improvises on it. One step further out than the impression, he called one canvas, in short, the canons. Improvisation 30. Underneath it, revolution and war. He does not report the battle. He plays a variation on it. Paint a cannon the way it looks, and you get the barrel and 2 wheels. A heap of cast iron. That is not the cannon, because the truth of a cannon is that it fires, and the shell rips space apart. That is the thing itself. So he paints the shutter in the air, the trembling of everything alive, matter torn open by the blast. And he's not alone in this. Every painter of the early 1900s is chasing the same thing. The essence of the thing, not its surface. They want to break inside it the way the X-ray did. Suddenly my eyes do not see what is really there, so I have to seize the heart of it. The third genre is the composition. No source at all. Nothing that sparked it, only his own stream of thought shaped into a canvas. His personal invention. Form alone had spoken. The subject only confirmed it, so he built a whole new kind of painting on that discovery. 3 of them. Here is the question under everything he made. If I want to paint a birch tree, he said, I paint a birch. But I want to paint God. And no one knows what God looks like. So he built his entire idea of painting on a single principle. He called it inner necessity. And that is his real answer to the question everyone keeps putting to him. Why abstraction? Why walk away from things you can see? A painting, he said, owes you three things at once. It has to carry the man who made it, his own individuality. It has to carry the age he lives in. And it has to speak of the eternal. By the eternal, he meant the religious subjects, the existential questions every single person carries around. So hold two pictures side by side, Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son, and an old icon, Christ in Majesty from the museum in Yaroslavl, two different worlds. But both of them are reaching for one and the same idea. Because there is the idea, there is the subject, and there is the way that subject gets painted. Three separate levels. Miss the difference, and you have missed the picture. And here is the trap waiting in ordinary painting. You see the sun come home, you name the story, you walk off. Solved. Except you never reach the idea underneath. Thousands of painters painted that same sun. Rembrandt painted one exact thing. Forgiveness coming down from the Father, not begged for by the boy. The Father on earth, he thought, and the Father in heaven. An icon will not let you weave like that. Believer or not, you stand in front of it and you already know. God does not actually look like this. It is a sign. It points past itself to something you are never going to see with your eyes. So the painters of the early 1900s had a thought. Take the subject away. Go back to the thing the icon already was, sign painting. Because an icon in its bones is already abstract, it shows nothing that exists in the world. Only ideas, dressed up in figures. And those ideas can just as well live in color, line, and form. Kandinsky said it without flinching. The Holy Spirit cannot be shown as a thing, only without one. That, he said, is my goal. To give body to light from light, the streaming light of the divine. This is sign painting, his alternative to the icon in the 20th century. So look again at his abstract canvases. Those lines were figures once. They did not hide. They shrank, pressed down into a line, because he had grasped one thing. You can leave the figures behind entirely. The line itself, the color itself, will carry the meaning. And color is how he reaches your soul. Color is the key, he said. The eye is the little hammer, the soul is the piano. The painter's hand strikes one key, and a human soul starts to vibrate. He does to you exactly what a priest does over you at prayer. He moves you into a certain state. Painting has its own language, he decided. A point, a line, each one with a sound of its own. Hot lines and cold lines, straight ones and coiling ones, every one of them ringing differently, like pieces of music. And 10 years on, he pushed it further. A point and a line, he found, can hold more than painting. The essence of everything alive, the foundations of the world. And that is where the whole thing was heading. The composition laws of nature, he wrote, do not hand the artist something to copy from the outside. They hand him something to set his own laws of art beside. Find the laws of nature, take them over for art, and paint on the strength of them. That, he said, is the point of all his work. One story seals it for me. In 1916, a woman telephoned him only to pass some papers on to a mutual friend. He had never seen her, and he fell in love with the voice on the line. Before he ever saw her face, he sat down and painted it. He called the watercolor to an unknown voice. A voice he could not see, painted anyway. That is the whole method in one gesture. God cannot be shown, only hinted at, so he turned the picture into a sign, the way an icon is a sign. And once a picture could carry the laws of the world itself, one question was left. What was he really showing us? He painted the great compositions in 5 days flat. 5 days! But behind each one sat half a year of studies, sketches, drafts. Composition 7. He finished in those same 5 days, the 23rd to the 28th of November. And before he touched the canvas, he drew its forced lines out like an engineer. Nobody would call that chaos. Watch how Composition 7 grew. It began as a picture called All Saints' Day. Saints, halos, an icon you could read. That became the Angel of the Last Judgment. That became, in the end, the plain Last Judgment. At every step, the detail falls away. What stays is the essence and the light. He talked about a finished painting the way you talk about a new world being born. It needs time, he said. It needs a force of its own, like a butterfly working its way out of the cocoon. The picture has to be born first and only then ripen. So what is he actually showing? Here is the honest answer. Whatever you see in it is right. These are pictures built for many readings at once, and there's nothing to argue about. But underneath, every one of us feels the same thing. A storm, confusion, something warm and something cold colliding. Kandinsky told us what that collision was. In Composition 6, he is painting the Deluge, the whole world going under. Those warm and cold tones smashing into each other are the human against the natural, chaos in the middle. A fight for life and death. And he saw nothing terrible in it. Significant, yes. A turning point, but not frightening. Listen to how he described that canvas. The highest tragedy hides itself under the greatest coldness, a cosmic tragedy where the human element is only one voice among many. The focus moved into a sphere that touches the divine. Now, here is the difference that changes everything. Everyone who ever painted the Deluge painted it through human eyes. A pair of little trousers floating on the water, a dove. He painted it through the eyes of God. Think of the space station. From orbit you would not see a single figure. No dove, no faces, no detail. Only something vast, raging, warm against cold. His paintings are that view. They are from far above. And this is why the end of the world did not frighten him. Kandinsky was a theosophist. In that system, every catastrophe matters. A cataclysm is a point of growth. You cannot cross from one state of being into the next without living through it, without surviving it. He even looked forward to the Russian Revolution, an apolitical man. No revolutionary at all, waiting on it like a cleansing. Which brings us to Composition 7. Look at it beside the others. Here the warm and the cold have stopped fighting. They play one melody now, all of them together on the same side. And for the first time he put the whole canvas onto a single line, one diagonal running clean across it. He had chased that line for years. That diagonal works like a springboard. Your eye hits it and jumps. It cuts straight through the picture and keeps going, out the far side, a flight into deep space. And the subject of Composition 7 is the apocalypse, the last judgment. That is exactly where he had started and where he finally arrived. But look at it. It is not terror, it is joy. Because for him the apocalypse is the point of growth, the cleansing, the door into the kingdom of tomorrow. And if you stood in front of it and felt that lead, that gladness, then he has you. That was the whole aim. Kandinsky wanted to prove one impossible thing. Apocalypse equals joy. Feel the joy and the proof is complete. Yet stopped painting the store from inside it. He was painting it from orbit and calling the end of the world a joy. So stand in front of one now, the kind on 100 posters, and do the thing almost nobody does. Stop hunting for the subject. There is nothing to find. He took it out on purpose. He wanted you to stand there a long time. Long enough that everything at the edge of your sight stops bothering you and you feel you have sunk inside the thing. You can watch a street from a window. You cannot watch his painting that way. You have to step out into the street. He did not want you to understand it. He wanted you to feel it. Knowing this is an apocalypse and feeling one are different things. So he stripped the story out and kept only the accents. It was the only way to paint an apocalypse joyfully without making you laugh. There is a catch. You have to come at it from the emotional side, not the rational one. And the rational side is the one we are all better at. So Kandinsky split us in two. The people who admit something beyond the material, a spiritual thing, and the people who do not. For the second kind, this art is far harder to reach. Not shut forever, just genuinely hard. He learned this the hard way. He thought pulling the story out would make life easier for you. His own exhibitions told him the opposite. Abstraction turned out to be a difficult language. But he never set abstraction against ordinary painting. For him, they were two languages, both real. As soon as he illustrated a fairy tale or painted a landscape, he walked straight back into figurative work. The rule ran both ways. Surrealism, though, stayed foreign to him. He looked at those pictures and found no spirituality, no cosmos, none of the depth he was chasing. He had split the world of objects from the world of the spirit, and he wanted to paint the second one, the motifs no landscape could hold. Every artist is a prism of his own age. He takes the whole era into himself and throws those rays back onto the canvas. So look at what the age puts on the canvas. In 1401, Brunelleschi cracks open one-point perspective, a way to fold deep space onto a flat cloth. A revolution. In 1435, Jan van Eyck paints blue mountains far behind his Madonna, and not only for the symbol. He is telling the whole world he is one of the few who knows how. Now stand in front of Moscow. Painted in 1916, Kandinsky knows something Van Eyck could not. There is no straight perspective anymore. There is non-Euclidean geometry, relativity, the atom coming apart, the X-ray. So the city swirls and burns and refuses to hold still. He did not predict any of it. For the last 50 years, physics has said we live in a world of 17 dimensions, folded up small. He did not foresee that and paint it. The worldview under his feet had simply shifted, and he mirrored it. He was not alone. The abstract painters of that half-century were all thinking about how the universe is built. Mondrian offered a system of opposites, Klee, a system of growth. For Kandinsky, the atom was a point that gives birth to a line. For Malevich, in Russia, it was the square, the circle, the triangle. So, here is the whole method, and it is smaller than you feared. When you meet an abstraction you do not know, you do not decode it. You just ask yourself what you feel. That is enough, because all of it lands as feeling, not as story. So, how do you paint the spiritual, the thing that cannot be shown? You do not. You take the tree, the face, the story out of the picture. Nothing is left but a color, a line, a point, a sign that only hints at what lies underneath. And the next time you stand in front of one of his storms of color, you can stop doing the one thing everyone does. Stop hunting for the subject. Stand there until the room falls away. Then ask one question: what do I feel? That is the whole method, and the answer is yours. You do not have to love Kandinsky, but you do have to know him. He did not predict the century that was coming. He was the mirror it held up to itself. And if this is your kind of thing, subscribe.